Welcome back to The Rough Draft. It is an honor to have today's guest on the show. She has a Ph.D. in history from Princeton, a master's in African American studies from Columbia, a BA in history from Dartmouth, a National Academy of Education Spencer Fellow, owner and founder of Triple Ivy Writing and Educational Solutions, a rising star on Medium who writes about race, education, social justice. I am truly grateful to introduce, for her first appearance on The Rough Draft, Dr. Hamilton. Welcome back to The Rough Draft. Today's guest, Ph.D. in history from Princeton, a master's in African American studies from Columbia, a BA in history from Dartmouth, has toured the Ivy League with higher education, a National Academy of Education Spencer Fellow, and also the owner, founder, operator of Triple Ivy Writing and Educational Solutions. Today, Dr. Hamilton, welcome to The Rough Draft. I am beyond grateful that you're taking some time out of your day to jump on the show with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your reaching out as well.
Oh, of course. And we got together through Medium. I had read one of your first articles on the platform, and we'll break that down on the latter half of the show. But as I got to discovering you, your writing and your career by no means started just by pressing publish on Medium. So I want to jump back to, the beginning. And it's sure through education is where you probably had to harness and really carve out who you were as a writer. When did you begin really writing, sharing, and writing longer form articles or opinion type pieces and observations of what you were seeing in society and in culture today?
Sure. Well, if you want to go all the way back, I actually will say that I began when I was in elementary school. I always loved to write, and I began entering contests early on. I went to school at the Chicago Public Schools in Chicago, and I remember having my mom help me. My very first topic that I had to write about was whether or not I thought that they should integrate students who had contracted HIV into the school system, and should they be allowed to go to class, be in classes with other students. And I wrote this piece, and I remember the day that I was leaving home to go submit it, and my mother took a look at it, and she said, "Oh no, this is not going to work. Like, you need to go back through this and revise it." And I was so frustrated because, I was one of those students who really wanted to have perfect attendance, and I was afraid that I was going to be late for school if I stayed back. But she had me go back through that process, and I just remember the power of the revision process, which for me is really probably the most important part of the writing process. And so just from that moment on, I really became interested in using writing to be able to speak to issues of social justice. And so just moving forward through college, my background in history, I did a lot of research, for instance, on African American women's experiences in slavery. So everything that I really was sort of interested in, I was interested in pursuing topics that would allow me to speak more readily to those issues that I cared about, and to actually speak with more conviction and passion to the issues that I've cared about. And so really just, going through with the master's program, obviously having to do a thesis, and really probably starting with the PhD program is when I began to kind of put some more of my writing out there. There's been a little bit of a lull, and I think this is important for me to talk about, because I think that sometimes we go through a period where maybe we're not as confident. There's a lot of things happening. So I feel like I'm in a position now, a place where I just really feel like I'm coming back and I'm ready to kind of contribute in a big way. So yeah, I probably started maybe my first or second year of grad school trying to put pieces out there. I've written about, for instance, like the Trayvon Martin trial, a lot of those police brutality trials, also being able to kind of switch over to cultural issues as well. And so I think just with all the diversity of my experiences has allowed me to shift gears, whether or not it's academic writing, the kind that requires really deep research, or the kind that just kind of speaks to kind of the more urgent social issues. My training has really allowed me to do that. But I never really sort of departed from that earlier point in my childhood when I really felt like my writing could help to inspire people and to really kind of change the way that they think about important social issues.
What you said about not being a departure, it's so clear that you've been educated on what you write, and it's not I read your work and it just feels like a voice. Like I can hear you speaking it as if it's a conversation, and it's very educational. And what comes in there is sometimes what we don't see is, hey, this wasn't a weekend worth of research. It's like, this is decades worth of research, to the point where you just know it. It's so in you that when you write, you're speaking it, and it's that comes across. If we can go back to when you talked about the revision process being maybe the most important part of writing, and I totally resonate with that.
Sure.
There's the times where I write something, I'm like, great, it's done, I can't wait to get it out. But deep down, I know I have to edit that. I have to potentially seek some dissension from trusted readers and get their feedback, even though it may pause it a week or 2 weeks. What does that look like for you? You write something, you're proud of it, you love it, but you know you sort of need to ask for criticism and break it down, and it may not be what it is today. How do you go about doing that? But also, how do you speak to yourself and put yourself in a position where you say, hey, I'm actually inviting criticism onto something so intimately mine right now, and I'm okay with that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, well, number one, anyone who goes through academia is going to get a rude awakening when it comes to critique, and you have to kind of will yourself to be able to bounce back from that. But I think that for me, I actually look at the revision process as fun, because what I really believe, I mean, obviously it depends on the piece that you're writing. If you're trying to get something out right away, you may not have that time. But I think that just giving yourself the time to step back and actually come back to your work as the editor. So there's the writer, the part of you that is just really trying to get those ideas out there. And especially if you're a perfectionist, this can be where you would get into trouble, because you're trying to perfect every line. But remembering that you can go back to the process. I think that the Ph.D. program was really helpful for that, because you're constantly reshaping what you're writing. And the thing that they tell you in school is that this won't be your magnum opus. You know, you have to get it done. And so you have to, you want to do something that you're happy with, but just know that there will be an opportunity to revisit it. And that's kind of how I always look at writing. I actually, 2 projects that I just submitted a draft for something today. It's a journal article. I actually wrote that piece 10 years ago. So I was coming back to that piece with greater insight. And I feel like the writing evolved. And it's really funny because I submitted it I had a former professor take a look at it. And before I even sat down to revise it, and she had some time to look at it. And then when I started looking through it, I said, oh my God, this is horrible. And what my horrible is probably a pretty good, because I did well on the paper, but in terms of 10 years, my evolution, I was looking at it, the prose, it needs tightening. It's just so many different things that I can do with this. And so I was able to go back through it. And I told her, I said, I'm sorry I sent you that. And she said, no, that's who you are. I mean, that's, obviously the ideas are there and you're always going to be reshaping them. But I said, I really want you to see the second draft so that you can know that some things have changed since then. So
that will also be a fantastic body of work that proves how much you've grown and evolved, where you can see something that was great at the time, a decade ago, and now a decade later, you're going to be adding to it. So it sounds just like taking a great piece of work and adding a decade's worth of insights to make another great piece of work. So if that is something that will go live at some point, I definitely want to be checking that out. And whenever that goes live,
yeah.
So you say, hey, you. Go check it out.
Thank you. I mean, it's actually focused on Black women's roles in the suffrage movement. So, you know, pretty timely piece. I just wanted to speak very quickly about, because I'm sure not everybody has 10 years to wait to publish something, but the piece that I just put out recently, a couple of days ago, I started it 2 weeks ago, and I just kind of wasn't happy where it was in that that moment. But then I came back to it and I realized it was actually pretty good. I just needed to kind of go through it and tighten it. So I think what I'm saying is being able to allow yourself some distance, however much distance you have from the piece, I think will really inevitably make you a better writer.
Piggybacking tips for writers. For those who may not have the opportunity for higher education, who may not have the opportunity for a one-on-one relationship with a professor, I know you founded and operate Triple Ivy Writing, and you have a menu of services that brings everyone from here to here and beyond. Is there anything like the lower barrier to entry tips for writers and individuals that are trying to get a little bit better that may not have had that same opportunity at some point within academia?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, again, it might be hard to believe, but when I started undergraduate, I was actually placed in what they consider a remedial writing course, because I hadn't had the voice was there, but the structure in terms of teaching me the fundamentals of writing wasn't there. And so this course was a two semester course, whereas most people just had a 1 semester course. And it was really all about like kind of going through that process. And what I realized was that my voice hasn't changed since, you know, I was that, you know, kid writing for essay contests. It was just really trying to give me, I guess, a medium, a place to really kind of push me in different directions. And I think that what I would say to anyone beginning is the thing that you're really going to be looking for is your voice, finding your voice. Because once you begin to locate your voice, I believe everything else will begin to fall into place. So I think obviously when you're writing about something you really care about, whether or not it's something biographical, whether or not you're trying to, you know, advance a political, you know, argument or so forth, really finding that place of conviction that you're really sort of attached to what you're writing about, I think that will help everything else to fall into place. So when you're looking at these pieces and you're like, oh my God, the words, they seem a little bit disjointed, I think that all of that stuff can be worked out, but the voice is something that's going to make your writing distinct, and it's going to be the thing that will carry you through when you just are kind of frustrated and you're like, I just don't know if I can do that. Yeah, I would say just overall, just use writing as an opportunity to find your voice, and you know, all the other things will eventually fall into place, but it's a practice. It's something that takes time, you know, and you really have to be committed to kind of experiencing that process.
Now, Dr. Hamilton, I don't know my voice. Help me find my voice. You know, if I were someone coming to you with that, is there anything, or what direction would you point someone in who is saying, I guess I don't know where I have my convictions or what my voice is. I think I should write about this, but this is what I care about. Is there anything you'd say, okay, here, do this to do some soul searching and you'll find your voice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is what matters to you. So, I mean, this is something that I've used in my teaching. I taught English for a couple of years, and I've taught history, high school history, and I've also helped a number of students with their college admissions essays. And the thing that I ask them to think about, what matters to you? What do you really care about? And I mean, it could be family, it could be a social issue. Maybe there's someone who is, who likes satire, is very sort of a humorous person. Any of those things, when you begin to kind of think about your personality, then you maybe just choose one moment in your life, a person in your life that you'd like to write about, and then just kind of use that as an experience to like figure out, who you are as a person. And you may not locate that right away, but there has to be a starting point. I think, to me, the beauty is, especially working with young people, students, is when they don't, I mean, they're young, so they may not feel like they have experiences to be able to say who they are, but almost inevitably, when you just really push them to dig deeper and for them to actually begin to realize that, they have a perspective that, how they feel and think matters, and to see that evolve into something terrific in the written word is just, to me, just phenomenal. So, I mean, I've worked with young people. I mean, the writing is just phenomenal, but they had to start at a place where they were willing to take some risks. The risk might have been in the form of a not so good grade from me. They were terrified but once you push them and they begin to soar, it's just an amazing thing that happens. So
I'm jealous of the front row seat you've gotten to younger generations, really, because I admire this Gen Z and these younger generations and what they're doing publicly, and how mature I view some of their leaders to be, compared to kind of the disappointment I sometimes felt growing up of my generation, knowing how immature I may have been at 16, 17, or 18, and seeing some of these leaders emerge over the past 5 years. I can't even, reading their writing must have been such a behind the scenes look. So I'm envious, jealous, but also like want to celebrate that too, because that sounds so.
Yeah, but I mean, it's never too late. That's the thing, and you have something unique. Your walk is unique, and whatever experiences that you had, you can bring that to bear to this current moment. Not everybody moves along at the same pace, and this is what I was saying a few minutes ago about my feeling like there's been a sort of lull, right? We want these things to happen immediately, but sometimes you just kind of move at a different pace, and you have to be, patience is a hard thing for a lot of people to accept, but I think being patient with yourself, that eventually that process will unfold, and it'll become clearer for you the direction that you like to head in.
That's pretty awesome advice. It really is.
It's not a sprint. That's the thing, right? It's not a sprint.
The ebbs and dips and flows, and like trusting that process and finding the comfort where you're like, hey, today wasn't a great day, or I haven't had it these past couple weeks. It's like, it'll come back, and being able to believe that and have comfort there is, it's a personal exercise I think a lot of us can be benefiting from. I want to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about a piece you wrote that is the reason, I believe is the one I read that started our conversation, called How White Women Can Use Their Privilege to End Racism. I don't want to do any spoilers. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with that. When we come back, we will jump into a conversation about a Medium piece titled How White Women Can Use Their Privilege to End Racism. It's one of the most powerful stories I've read on Medium this year, and it just so happens to be written by today's guest, Dr. Hamilton. So I wanted to share a preview of that and build some excitement for what's to come. Before we do that, though, I want to reserve some time to say thank you to the partners of the show. Golden Root, Turmeric Latte Mix, and Half Moon Yoga and Meditation. Thank you for believing in conversations like this between writers and believing that they should be held publicly. Privately, I keep a meditation practice, and I use Half Moon's cushions every day, every afternoon,
and it's done a lot for my practice, knowing that I need it to be comfortable for it to be sustainable. For Golden Root, I drink one of your lattes, usually warm, but now in the summer months, I'll pour it over ice, and it's quite a blend of flavors. And it also gets the curcumin in my system. So thank you so much for taking care of my body and nourishing my practices. Now, let's get back in and continue the show and conversation with Dr. Hamilton.
Welcome back to The Rough Draft, joined today by Dr. Hamilton. And I want to waste no time and get right into this piece. I want to start by reading a quote from it. I pulled a few, but I want to start with one that's earlier in the piece, and it reads, "Perhaps it is a foreign concept to most, but white people drawing upon their privilege to oppose racism is not entirely unheard of in our nation's history." And you go on to ask, what can genuinely concerned white women do to help end these daily assaults on Black life? What I love about this piece is you bring up, I was left with this challenge to myself in the world, but also to an observation type thing where saying, listen, as a white person in culture right now, in society, you have this sort of public community that others do not. And understand how critical it is to use that to intervene when you can, where you see it, even when you're not seeing it in the privacy of your home and family conversations. Use that, because if not, it's an abuse of something that the color of your skin that you were born with. If you're not going to use that to increase equity, equality, safety of the lives of others, then it's abusing it. And I don't want to steal words or put words in your mouth, but this piece can, if you can remember when you started writing it, can you walk me through what that experience was like and what you wanted to make sure was included in this piece?
Sure. So it's something that I thought about when I first, obviously the footage of George Floyd, brought up a lot of emotions for me and a lot of people, but I wasn't really sure initially if I was going to watch it, but I think I saw it earlier on before it really got a lot of press. And so I don't think I knew I didn't know what to expect. So maybe that was the reason why I started to watch it. But once I had seen it, I just felt like there was something that I needed to do to contribute to this conversation. And one of the things that I knew immediately that there was going to be a lot of discussion about, obviously about the sort of rage and anger, frustration that Black people feel around this issue that we've been for decades really trying to bring attention to. But I wanted to offer something that maybe took us down a little bit of a different road, to kind of stand apart from some of that, because I knew one of the questions, especially for white people watching this, was going to be, what can I do, right? And it seemed like a really important moment to seize upon that. I was having a conversation with a fellow academic who happens to be named Karen, and we were just talking, and I was basically, everything that I said in the piece, I kind of was saying to her, and she said, "You should write that piece. You should do that." And I said, okay, I don't know, maybe. She said, "No, it's on your mind right now. Do it right now before you lose it." And so she actually made me get off Zoom. We were on Zoom together, and I just sat and I just worked on the piece. One of the reasons why I was reluctant to do it was because for me, writing is I become so invested in the writing. And I know it's not something that's just going to take me 30 minutes or an hour, especially coming to it with a historical lens. I knew that there was going to be some research. So you mentioned before that, a lot of this stuff is in my head. Well, some of it's not. I have reference points, but I know that sometimes I need to maybe go back and look up some information. And so that's going to require, my entire day or a couple of days. And so the question for me is, am I really willing to commit that time? And so, but as I began, I realized that this was really important for me to go ahead and finish. And so, it was a sleepless night for me to get that through. But yeah, I mean, that really is the one thing that keeps me back more than anything, I would say, is knowing that I'm going to have to invest in this, this blank page. If I want this page to be filled with my ideas and I want them to be really speak to sort of my level of insight, then it's not going to be an in and out deal. And so, I mean, that pretty much is what inspired that. So.
And reading that, I think at the end you include the nod to the Karen in your life who urged you to write it. There's another quote. It's a bit longer, and I want to read it. It says, "Short of martyrdom, then what can concerned white women do to help end these daily assaults on Black life? Well, instead of demanding to see the store manager for trivial reasons, what if Karen demanded to see the store manager because one of their employees has been trailing Black people around the store? What if latte-toting Becky or Chad stood up to the manager as he attempts to toss Black shoppers out on the pavement? Or maybe it is as simple as an army of Amy's looking up from Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat and penetrating the personal space of the police officer who is squeezing the life out of a Black man for no other reason than being Black." That paragraph was fantastic. And I use that, I want to be sensitive about using that word because it is a life or death conversation. And it's one where, reading that it's a humbling thing as a white person, because you urge the reader to really confront themselves and say, you can post that Black square, you can do the performance activism, you can talk about it in your friends, but are you willing to do it in public? Does a Black life mean enough to you truly that you're going to be out there calling it and intervening when you see it? And the challenge is offered with such delicacy, and using, the Karen, Amy, and Chad that has been memeified to a bit, it makes it so relatable where you know exactly what you're saying here. When writing that, was that difficult? Did that flow out of you? What was that experience like on this paragraph?
So I wrote that piece from the vantage point of having to do all of those things. There are points in my life where I've had to do each of those things as a Black woman. And knowing that there could be a questionable response in terms of how people are going to receive me as a Black woman doing those things. But there's something ingrained in me that makes it very difficult for me to witness an injustice or witness someone being mistreated and just stand by and say nothing. I know that a lot of people have it in them that they really want to be courageous in that way. Oftentimes they just don't know how. I think that what I'm asking for is to make that part of one's daily practice. The problem is when it comes to Black people, brown people, there are often consequences to that behavior. Now, for me, I'm still willing to intervene, but just knowing that there are consequences. The consequences for most white people are not going to be the same. I mean, this comes from the history of the civil rights movement. Strategically during the civil rights movement, activists would invite white people into those movements because they knew that this was going to kind of ensure a degree of safety. Not always, but a degree of safety in terms of their activism. And for me, I just think that, here's the other part, is being able to see Black people as human, right? Being able to see Black people as deserving of that. Well, how do you actually view African Americans? How do you view Black people? Do you view Black people on the same level of humanity as you view yourself? And if that's the case, then you should naturally feel this impulse to want to step in. And that's why with the example that I led with the woman who's yet to be identified, I wonder if she knows that that she inspired an article. But I was really amazed by just her willingness to just step up. And I just said, yeah, this is something, in a way, it's kind of easy, for white women to do, white men to do as well. And I'm not sure if they know that it can be that simple. So I mean, I just think that, like I said, for me, that list, I mean, I've had to do that. And actually I've written articles about it, that I've had to do that when I've seen that happen. And just if more people were willing to do that, to take on that responsibility, then I think that would change the nature of these conversations.
I agree with you when you say it's easy. It's easy to step in and involve yourself when you see it. Is there, what would you, it could be speculation, but for someone who doesn't step up or a person who's unwilling to, is there anything that you've come across in your research that you've been able to map out to say, why don't people, why do individuals allow injustices to continue? Why do individuals not intervene? Why do individuals not use their public community to just be a good human?
Yeah. Well, I mean, history is the best example. I think that question has been asked time and time again. I mean, questions about, the Holocaust that Germany perpetuated. A huge question was, why did people stand idly by and allow this to happen? Period of enslavement, people who didn't own slaves, why did they allow this to happen? I think that there are layers to that question. And I think that first and foremost, looking at the history of racism, I think some of it has to do with a feeling of, feeling equal and feeling like people are deserving of the same treatment and the same rights as you are. I think that's one of the issues. But I also think that a lot of it stems from fear. A great deal of it stems from fear. And I mean, I don't even just mean being out on the street and seeing, police officers confront a Black person. I mean, just in your everyday life where you see someone being mistreated. And so many times, people will say, I felt bad about not saying anything, or when I've intervened, maybe they've come to me and say, oh, I'm so happy you did that. And my question, well, why didn't you do that? And I think that fear is real. Fear is a real emotion that, whether it's fear of, retaliation in form of a person's livelihood. I mean, that's a huge one. That's a serious one. Whether or not it's, violent retaliation. I think that that's something that really stops people from being vocal about these issues. I don't know what it is in me and I'm not saying that I'm fearless, but I don't tend to operate from a standpoint of fear. So it's harder for me to accept. It would be harder for me to accept myself if I didn't intervene or live with myself if I didn't intervene than if I just, than if I did. And so, I mean, it's a really difficult question because again, I think there are levels to it. I mean, some situations may present more of a danger than others, but I think that people really have to begin working through the fear. And especially if it doesn't bring about or promise, violent retaliation. There are so many things. I mean, the last article I just wrote about institutional racism, your livelihood may be at stake sometimes when you're making, when you're speaking out, but it's not your life. It's not your life. So in those moments, you have to be willing to just dig into the courage and just understand that change doesn't happen unless you're just willing to kind of put yourself on the line, because everybody has, reasons why. You have children you have to worry about, you got to, make your bill payments, any number of reasons. Everybody can come up with a reason why they can't do something. Well, what I'm saying is that you need to push beyond that, because the more people that are willing to do that, then it will become unnecessary, because they can't at a job, they can't fire everyone, right? If everyone stepped together collectively, they can't fire everyone. If the police knew that they were going to be under surveillance by just regular people acting every day, then they might begin to change some of their behavior. So I guess that's really what I'm trying to speak to.
Thank you. Thank you for the unpacking that piece and more. In the final moments of our conversation, I want to know who Dr. Hamilton is away from the keyboard. I read you've finished, I think, 5 or 6 half marathons. You're nourishing yourself away from the keyboard, mindfulness practices. What are you doing to take care of you?
Okay. Well, that's really challenging under a pandemic, right? First of all, which everyone has that issue. And it's also, an important question for me as a Black woman who oftentimes is carrying, weights that other people don't have to carry. But I think that loving the world and thinking of life as a gift is what allows me to step away sometimes. So one of the things I love to do, I travel by myself. I've probably visited over 24 countries on my own, because it allows me to really just kind of break away and become one with nature. And I usually take, the untrodden paths when I'm traveling, meeting different people, getting a sense of, their experiences and kind of comparing them to mine, and oftentimes seeing the ways in which I'm privileged. I think that that's really important. And just being able to just kind of be in nature sometimes is important. I answer that question sometimes by saying exercising, and people don't understand because they're like, that seems like work. But no, I actually enjoy. It's something that, I feel like I'm giving myself when I can take the time to really just kind of, engage in some physical activity that just means that I'm staying healthy. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I have a very huge family. I just relocated back to Chicago 2.5 years ago so that I could be close to them. I have 5 siblings and I don't even know how many, 14, 15 nieces and nephews at this point. So I spend a lot of time with them, and they just help to ground me. They make, no matter when I'm up here, they help to bring me back down to earth. And I think that that's really, really important. So
what country's next on the list, do you think?
So my intentions were to try to step foot on Asian continent before the year is out. But I mean, the pandemic has kind of messed that up. But that's really where my next, because I've spent a lot of time in Latin America, so Central and South America. So I think the next step is for me to I want to do like Southeast Asia. That's really cool. Where I want to go next.
Cool. Well, I know by the time you get there will be another article out, but there also may be some 4-letter word, a book. Is there a book in your future?
Well, yes.
I read something about this.
Yes. So I'm hoping there are a couple of books in my future before I leave this earth. But the one that I'm working on right now is the revision of my dissertation. So it is Making a Model System, the Battle for Educational Equality in Washington, D.C., or the nation's capital, before Brown. So the Brown v. Board decision in 1954. And very loosely, the book is about the efforts of African Americans to desegregate schooling in the nation's capital, which a lot of people don't realize that Washington, D.C. actually experienced segregation, very much like they experienced slavery as well. But it's also about not centering integration as the primary goal for activists. So there's a lot of discussion about the redistribution of educational resources, even among African Americans who actually were, as long as they felt like they were being given adequate resources, they weren't necessarily protesting segregation. And as a matter of fact, many of them feared what integration would mean for the autonomy that they had developed in their leadership roles. And actually focusing on DC makes it a really sort of unique story, because DC not only is the nation's capital, but it's also a federal city. So it wasn't necessarily bound by the same laws as the segregated states. And so African Americans and their liberal allies were able to kind of use that leverage to articulate demands for greater resources, and then eventually moving into the decade before Brown for integration.
And is that a 2020 project, or when do you believe that will wrap that up?
I mean, the publishing process. So I'm still in conversations about a contract, which is kind of what has made it. Not having a contract probably has made it difficult to kind of push forward, because I'm self-motivated. I'm not on a tenure clock like a lot of people. But my hope is that 2021, at the fall 2021 or spring of 2022, that I'll get it out. So we'll see.
And until then, can we expect more Medium pieces?
I think that, yes. My goal is going to try to at least maybe try to do something once a month. I mean, I'm juggling a lot. As you know, I have my triple Ivy is my full-time job at this moment. So yeah, I mean, as much as I can, I want to really continue to write from a point of inspiration. I mean, there are a lot of ideas that are swimming around in my head at any given moment that I think that I could write about, but I don't necessarily just want to write and just kind of add to a lot of the noise that's out there. I want to be inspired and feel like I can kind of insert my viewpoint in a way that maybe people may not be talking about. So yeah, I'm hoping that I'll continue to do it.
I'm excited for that. Dr. Hamilton, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation, for coming on the show, for putting your work out for the public to consume, digest, and learn from. It's been an honor to be able to have this conversation. So thank you
so much. You've been very, very kind. Very great.
Well, I cannot wait to do this again, and then maybe track you down in some foreign country this decade and pop up and say, "Hey, I'm here."
That would be cool. It wouldn't be the first time it's happened.
There's not much more to say. That episode is something I have bookmarked and saved and will continue to return to. I encourage you to go read the article that we discussed on Dr. Hamilton's Medium profile and continue engaging with her work, the new stuff that's coming out. I am incredibly excited for. Also, thank you to Golden Root. Thank you to Half Moon Yoga and Meditation. Both of you, not only for supporting my practices and individuals who are choosing to invest in themselves away from the keyboard, but for supporting conversations like these and agreeing that there is an opportunity to bring more of these conversations to the world. Your support means the world. Thank you so much.